case of Abril Perez-Sagayan. Abril Perez-Sagayan was born in 1971 in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Her mother, Maria del Secero, worked diligently 7 days a week to ensure her 3 children, Abril, Javier, and Ana, had the opportunity for the best possible education and a bright future. Even at a young age, Abril displayed an exceptional aptitude for science and made it her goal to pursue higher education and financial independence. As Abril matured, she embodied a unique combination of intelligence, compassion, and physical beauty. Her sociable nature and innate leadership qualities made her an inspiration to her friends and a standout professional in her field. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and a master's degree in business from the Monterrey Institute of Technology. As Abril's career progressed, she discovered her passion for digital sales and rapidly climbed the ranks. She attained a prominent position as an executive director at Bilbao Bank in the United States. During the early 1990s, a time when Abril's professional accomplishments were flourishing, she met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. Juan Carlos was an ambitious entrepreneur, born on November 11, 1968. Juan Carlos and Abril discovered they had a lot in common. Both had attended the Monterrey Institute of Science and Technology, where Abril studied and Juan Carlos earned his degree with high academic achievement. Juan Carlos had also studied at top U.S. universities, including the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. With his education and experience, he considered himself a professional entrepreneur in e-commerce and financial technology. Juan and Abril became inseparable, collaborating on projects and socializing in the same friend circle. As time passed, their friendship blossomed into romance. After a few years of dating, they decided to tie the knot, and their wedding took place in 1994. Their collaboration led to numerous successful projects, including the online stores PAG, Mobile, and Plascom. They also played a key role in the development of the DEM store, which became a leading e-commerce platform in Mexico. By 1999, their life appeared to be a perfect fairy tale, with both partners achieving great success in their careers and enjoying a happy relationship. Their joy was further amplified with the birth of their first child, Ana Cecilia, in 2001. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., followed by another son, Julio Andres, in 2005. Despite their busy schedules, Abril prioritized her children's needs, taking care of them personally in attending their school activities. Abril's devotion earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. Juan Carlos was also a dedicated father, and together they created a seemingly ideal family that many people envied. However, behind the facade, the family was struggling with difficulties, and all members suffered due to Juan's short temper. Juan was a cruel man who frequently lashed out at anyone who crossed his path. His behavior towards his wife, Abril, began with verbal abuse, making her feel uncomfortable and hurt with his insulting words. Over time, the situation worsened, and Juan started using physical violence against Abril, regularly beating her. Abril attempted to conceal the abuse from her friends and family, fearing that she wouldn't be able to provide for their children on her own. She believed that staying with Juan would give their children a better future. However, by 2009, the situation had become so severe that others began to suspect what was happening in the family. Abril has always kept it a secret from her friends and family, but whenever they asked about a possible divorce, she insisted that she wouldn't leave Juan. By 2014, Juan had reached the pinnacle of his career, becoming a prominent figure in Amazon's retail industry in Mexico. A year later, when Juan became the director of Amazon in Mexico, the family had to relocate to Mexico City. Abril hoped that the change of scenery would resolve their problems, but unfortunately, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos presented himself as a loving husband and father to the public, but behind closed doors, he was abusive and controlling towards his wife, Abril. He would often post on social media about how much he loved her, but in reality, he was constantly accusing her of cheating and even hired a private investigator to gather evidence. Despite his successful career, which included becoming the director of e-commerce at a multinational company, his marriage was deteriorating. The tension between him and Abril became unbearable, and after a trip to Monterey to celebrate Christmas with her family, she realized she couldn't stay in the marriage any longer. During the trip, Juan's anger boiled over, and he physically attacked Abril, grabbing her by the neck and strangling her. He had received a photo from the private investigator of Abril with a male colleague, which he mistakenly believed was her lover. In reality, the man was just a co-worker. Abril decided not to engage with Juan's accusations and instead filed for divorce on January 4, 2019. They had already separated and planned to inform their children about their impending divorce. However, the situation took a violent turn one early morning. Abril was asleep when she was suddenly struck on the head with a baseball bat by her partner, Juan. Initially disoriented, Abril thought the ceiling had collapsed, but as her vision cleared, she saw Juan standing over her. She attempted to push him away and escape, but he overpowered her, prompting her to scream for help. Their 16-year-old son rushed to his mother's aid, quickly assessing the situation and intervening to prevent Juan from causing further harm. He managed to get Abril away from Juan and escorted her out of the house to seek emergency medical attention for her injuries. After the incident, Juan took to social media to share his side of the story. He made several posts claiming that Abril had been unfaithful, stolen his money, and wasted 26 years of his life. He also alleged that Abril had physically attacked him, stabbing him in the chest with a knife. To support his claims, he attached photos of the knife and what appeared to be bloodstains. One of Juan's friends responded by recording a video asking people to share the information. However, Juan's posts became increasingly bizarre. At one point, he even posted a message claiming that Abril had taken her life, despite being clearly alive. This move remains puzzling to this day. Meanwhile, Abril had been recovering in the hospital. After her discharge, she immediately filed a police report against her husband. The authorities sided with her, granting her custody of their 2 children and ordering Juan to pay 6,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $1,350, in monthly alimony. However, this amount was deemed insufficient to cover the costs of raising their 2 minors. After overcoming her initial fear and financial struggles, Abril began a new chapter in her life, driven by her determination to create a better future for her children. She relocated to Monterey with her kids, where she attended Juan Carlos' trial and filed for divorce. Reflecting on her traumatic experience and the abuse she suffered, Abril reevaluated her life. She joined a Christian organization that supported families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her ultimate goal was to establish a support system for women who had endured similar abuse, just as she had. As Abril worked towards rebuilding her life, the court proceedings against Juan Carlos continued. 9 months after the attack, Juan was formally charged with attempted murder. The case was then brought to court, where Judge Federico Mask ordered Juan's informal arrest. Consequently, Juan was incarcerated for several weeks. Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, Judge Hector Jimenez reviewed the case. He found the hospital photographs and Abril's testimony, along with that of her son, insufficient to prove Juan's guilt. The judge also believed that if Juan had intended to kill Abril, he would have done so. Additionally, he considered the baseball bat used in the attack to be a blunt object rather than a deadly weapon. As a result, the charges were downgraded and the preliminary arrest was canceled. With only a few hearings remaining, the outcome of the case was uncertain, causing Abril and her loved one significant anxiety and frustration. In a desperate attempt to have her concerns heard, Abril wrote to the judge, expressing her fears for her life and pleading for him to consider the threat Juan posed. However, her letter was ignored. Juan then began a custody battle for their children. Abril was forced to leave Monterey and travel to Mexico City for the remaining hearings. She also had to subject her children to psychological evaluations, as Juan had claimed in his lawsuit that Abril had manipulated them into rejecting him. A week before a critical court hearing, Abril sat down with her 3 children to express her love and wishes for their future. She encouraged them to chase their dreams and find the strength to forgive their father. This conversation seemed like a farewell, as if Abril sensed that it might be her last opportunity to reassure her children of her love. On November 25, 2019, Abril followed her ex-husband's instructions to avoid potential legal issues that could have led to her separation from her children. She traveled to Mexico City, coincidentally on the same day that thousands of women marched in the streets to commemorate the International Day Against Gender-Based Violence on March 19, 2021. The court reclassified a case involving violence against Abril, which occurred in January 2019, as attempted murder. This decision was made after Abril's relatives and the prosecutor filed several petitions for judicial review, ultimately leading to the cancellation of the original decision. 2 months later, on May 23rd, the remaining suspects in Abril's murder case were apprehended, including 3 women and 1 man. The investigation resulted in the issuance of 3 search warrants and 8 arrest warrants. During the first search, 48-year-old Amanda Vicente Rodriguez was taken into custody. A series of arrests were made in connection with a recent crime. In the Jardim de Morelos colony, 34-year-old Mabel Montelier Morena and 48-year-old Garcia Alicia Flores Valdez were taken into custody and their mobile phones were seized. Another arrest was made in the Alvar Aragon colony in Mexico City, where 50-year-old Isa Jalil Castillo, also known as Aguirre or Alvar's godmother, was detained. At the same time, 9 gang members were apprehended, with 7 of them allegedly linked to the Abril case. However, one suspect, Juan Carlos, remained at large, prompting authorities to reissue a warrant for his arrest. General Prosecutor Ernesto Godoy explained that the initial warrant was for attempted murder, while the new one was for the actual killing of a woman. Despite efforts to locate Juan, he remained elusive. In a surprising turn of events, a man named Rolf, also known as El Shalom, contacted the authorities and claimed to have information about the case. During questioning, he revealed that he was the one who had actually pulled the trigger and taken Abril's life. The perpetrator, Rodolfo Daniel Bendis, eventually pleaded guilty to the crime. He claimed that Juan Carlos had promised to pay him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bendis, Juan Carlos had contacted him while he was in pretrial detention, provided him with the address of Abril in Mexico City. Juan Carlos allegedly instructed Bendis to spy on Abril and provided written instructions on how to commit the crime. He also promised to provide Bendis with a gun in Monterrey. However, when Bendis arrived in Monterrey, no one contacted him, and he did not receive the gun. He returned to Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until after his release from prison. Upon his release, Juan Carlos contacted Bendis again and informed him that the plan had changed. He now wanted Abril to be killed in Mexico City, as he had managed to lure her there. The case was divided into multiple hearings due to the complexity of the judicial system. The first trial began in August 2022 with Bendis and Juan Carlos as the initial defendants. During this trial, the prosecution presented 28 witness statements and 14 pieces of expert evidence. During the recent trial, a key defendant known as L. Sean Gowlin testified about his role in planning committing the crime of feminicide for which he had previously pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court delivered its verdict, finding Rodolfo Danielo Baza and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty and sentencing them to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay approximately 56,000 Mexican pesos, $30,000 US in damages. Following the trial, they men were taken to a detention center to begin serving their sentences. However, the Abril family immediately announced their intention to appeal the verdict, as they believed the sentence was too lenient. They pointed out that Rodolfo was the one who fired the fatal shots. As for the remaining defendants, it was previously decided in October 2014 that their trials would be divided. This decision was met with an appeal from prosecutors, who argued that it would significantly delay the proceedings and result in unnecessary additional costs for the court. The tragic case of Abril continues to affect her family and the wider Mexican society, and despite the recent verdict, the trials are not yet over. After the court hearing, Abril got into a car with her children and their lawyer. She asked the lawyer to drive them to the airport for their flight back to Monterrey. En route, they stopped at an intersection where a motorcyclist pulled up beside them. The motorcyclist, who was actually a hired assassin, shot Abril multiple times in the head. Luckily, her children, who were seated in the back, escaped serious harm. One child, who was lying down, was grazed by a bullet but suffered only minor injury. Abril was rushed to the hospital where doctors fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries 6 hours later. The lawyer immediately contacted Abril's family to inform them of the tragedy. Her brother Javier traveled to Mexico City to handle the aftermath of the incident. The community suspected Juan Carlos of being involved in the crime, but the authorities took a different stance. Since the shooter's identity motives were unknown, they couldn't classify the case as femicide and make an arrest. Instead, the case was initially treated as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather evidence that could potentially prove it was a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to accuse Juan Carlos, but her account was deleted as a result. Abril's family was fearful that the perpetrator would go unpunished and sought to raise public awareness about the case through social media. The fact that Abril died on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence added a deeper significance to her death. The family organized protests and marches to demand justice for Abril. Following Abril's tragic death, social media erupted in outrage as people realized that she had repeatedly expressed her fear of her abuser, only to be ignored by the authorities. Her family and friends held a funeral mass at the Benito Flores Chapel in Monterrey, where dozens gathered to pay their respects and demand justice for Abril. The funeral procession then proceeded to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles, where Abril was laid to rest. Her case has sparked widespread attention to the issue of gender-based violence, particularly in cases where judges release men who have attacked women. Abril's ex-husband, Juan Carlos, was released from prison after appealing his sentence and was able to track Abril down to Mexico City, where he ultimately took her life. In response to Abril's case, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office has launched an investigation into the judges who allowed Juan Carlos to be released from prison. The judges in question, Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez, are being investigated for their roles in Juan Carlos' release. Additionally, representatives of the party of former Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador are calling for Judge Mosa's removal from office, citing his involvement in a previous controversial case in which he released a doctor who had disrespected a patient in a public hospital. The judge initially declined to charge Juan Carlos with femicide, instead only charging him with sexual violence, after which he was released from custody. During the public outcry surrounding the Abril case, Rafael Guerra, the president of the Supreme Court of Mexico City, suspended all judges involved in the case on November 29th. Mexico City's head of government, Claudia Sheinbaum, stated that the government would investigate Abril's death. She also warned that the judges involved in the case could be held accountable for Abril's death if it was proven that Juan Carlos was responsible. Local and international media reported that Juan Carlos was released despite evidence against him. Abril's family established a non-profit organization called the Voice of Abril to provide support to victims of violence, including information, psychological assistance, and legal aid. The public demonstration sparked by Abril's death prompted the prosecutor's office to reclassify the case against Juan Carlos, seeking to prosecute him for attempted murder, which could result in his imprisonment. After being charged, Juan Carlos took to social media to claim that he wanted justice for the crime against Abril and that the perpetrator should be punished. He also stated that he was willing to cooperate with the police despite having a troubled marriage with Abril, and he would never have wanted her to meet such a tragic end. However, his posts sparked widespread discontent among the community. His 18-year-old daughter, Ana Cecilia, publicly spoke out against her father, accusing him of physically and mentally abusing her, her siblings, and Abril over the years. She shared disturbing photos of Abril's injuries after being attacked with a baseball bat. Ana described her father as a narcissistic sociopath who allegedly bribed his way out of prison. During the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos, but it was not directly related to the Abril case. Instead, it was due to him violating judicial duties. Although he was released on the condition that he would check in with the police station weekly, he failed to do so. After missing 2 court hearings, Judge Agustin Manra Gaspar Canel was left with no choice but to issue the order. One wrote a letter claiming he feared for his life and did not want to attend the hearings, stating he and his family had received death threats since Abril's death. He believed someone would seek revenge if he appeared in court. However, the judge rejected this excuse and issued an arrest warrant, also restricting Juan from leaving the country. The investigation continued, aiming to uncover the truth. A letter from Juan was discovered, in which he again denied involvement in Abril's death, claiming he never intended to harm her. He described the night of the incident, stating that Abril had initiated a fight, stabbing him in the side, and he had hit her with a bat in self-defense. The letter sparked outrage among those who heard it, with no one believing Juan's account. The investigation has revealed that Juan Carlos is the primary suspect in the case. Further investigation by the police has identified at least 7 other individuals involved in the crime against Abril. This conclusion was reached after reviewing surveillance footage from the area where the events occurred. The footage shows 2 cars following Abril as she left the courthouse. The drivers of these cars were in contact with the perpetrator who fatally shot Abril. After the attack, the perpetrator and their cars fled the scene. Although the identities of the pursuers were not yet known at the time, the investigation suggested that Juan Carlos may have been involved in the crime. According to investigators, Juan Carlos likely met these individuals while he was in prison and paid one of them to protect him. After his associates were released from prison, Juan Carlos was also released. He then paid them to kill Abril. Notably, Juan Carlos was the only one who knew Abril's route to Mexico City, as he had requested to meet her. After the shocking details of the case became public, no law firm was willing to defend the suspect, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile, Abril's loved ones and colleagues cooperated fully with law enforcement, providing any information that could aid in his capture. However, sources from the General Prosecutor's Office soon revealed that Juan Carlos had managed to flee Mexico by crossing the border into the United States. Mexican authorities swiftly alerted Interpol, which launched a global manhunt for Juan Carlos. As a result, he became a wanted man in over 151 countries, with authorities determined to apprehend him at all costs. By the end of January 2024, the case had gone cold, with no new leads or updates. For years have passed since Abril's tragic death, yet the true perpetrators remain unpunished. Her children are now living with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, holding on to the hope that justice will eventually be served. Question on everyone's mind remains, where is Juan Carlos? His capture is still the top priority for the authorities. Abril's family has vowed to continue fighting for justice until Juan Carlos is found and brought to justice. 13-year-old Haley Dunn came from the small town of Colorado City in Texas. With a population of just under 4,000 people, the area Haley was from had a particularly tight community. Haley was described by her dad Clint as a tomboy that loved glittery and pretty things. Her mom Billie Jean Dunn said she always remembers her laugh, big smile, and how funny she was. She was bright and energetic teenager. Haley's friends said she loved to joke around and she was never afraid to speak her mind. She was a cheerleader, a saxophone player, and a competitive and talented athlete, loving school, her friends, and her teachers. By the time she reached the 8th grade, she was playing for the volleyball, basketball, and softball teams. Her parents would separate when she was 10 and Haley and her older brother David went to live with their mother and her boyfriend Sean Adkins on Chestnut Street in Colorado City. Haley and her dad Clint were especially close. Clint lived just across the road from them and Haley would swing by his house every day. Whether it be just popping in to say hi before school or staying over for dinner, she never missed an opportunity to spend time with him. Christmas Day 2010, Haley's grandmother Connie said that Haley was in great spirits that day. She was excited about the gift she had received that year, especially her new iPod, and spent most of Christmas and Boxing Day with her father. During the evening on Boxing Day, David, Haley's 16-year-old brother, went to a friend's house for a sleepover. Haley stayed at home and played video games into the night. The following morning, December 27th, Sean left for work at 5:30 a.m. Billie Jean also left about an hour later to start a 12-hour shift. She said she checked in on Haley, who was sound asleep in her bed. Everything appeared to be fine. Billie said that Haley would be home alone all day as she and Sean would be out at work, and she assumed that when Haley got up she would simply head over to her dad's house as she normally would. Billy also left her cell phone at home so the children could use it if they needed to. Sean arrived at his job in Snyder at around 6 a.m. He then said he got into a bad fight with his boss 10 minutes after he arrived and ended up quitting on the spot, before heading to his mother's house in Big Spring and then driving back to Colorado City just before 3 p.m. Haley's father Clint was used to seeing his daughter every day, but on December 27th, Haley didn't knock his door, and he didn't hear from her all day. At around 2 o'clock that afternoon, a text was sent from the cell phone left at the house to a friend of Haley's saying, "WYD, what are you doing?" This friend never replied. Later that evening, Sean picked Billy up from work. Billy said that when she got home, she realized Haley wasn't in the house. She asked Sean if he had seen her. He said that Haley had left the house on foot to go to her father's, and then had plans to stay the night at her friend Mary Beth's house. But Clint confirmed this definitely wasn't the case. The next morning came and went, and Haley was still not home. Billy decided to phone Mary Beth's parents, who confirmed they hadn't seen Haley at all, and she definitely didn't spend the night with them. Nothing was missing from Haley's room, and certain things everyone would have expected her to take if she were staying at someone's house were all still there. Billy started going door to door, asking everyone if they had seen her daughter, but no one had. Billy said she was scared that maybe someone had driven past and snatched her while she was walking to a store, and she even wondered if maybe Haley had been in a bad mood, which resulted in her storming out of the house that day. A missing persons report was filed on the afternoon of the 28th of December. Investigators initially classed Haley's disappearance as a runaway, but a short while later, her case was reclassified as a missing child case. This was a decision that the police would later receive immense backlash for making. The community rallied around the family and sprung into action to try and find Haley. The media quickly ran with the story too. Clint was devastated and distraught at his daughter's disappearance, and he spent every waking moment looking for her. He rifled through dumpsters, searched the streets and alleyways, and anywhere else he could think of. People reported that this level of concern was not shared by Billy and Sean. As the searches expanded into more vast and open areas, reporters recalled that Billy didn't want to partake in these searches. Billy herself said that while she was happy to hand out flyers and talk to the media, she couldn't deal with looking in wooded areas or fields, because that made her think they were looking for her daughter's body. Searching these more rural areas was also something that Clint struggled to do. Billy's boyfriend Sean, however, didn't even hand out flyers, let alone participate in the searches, and he was very far removed from the investigation. Numerous people were questioned, including registered sex offenders in the area, but everyone was quickly ruled out. Wednesday, December 29th, Clint and Billy's homes were searched, and a day later, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children got involved in the case. Dogs managed to track Haley's scent throughout the neighborhood, which led them to a nearby motel. But the staff there did not recall seeing Haley, and she wasn't seen on any of the surveillance footage either. A thorough search of all 24 suites in the building failed to produce any evidence that Haley had ever been there. Billy and Sean threw a New Year's Eve party on the 31st, just 4 days after Haley was reported missing, and many people were confused at the timing of this. Billy said she didn't even realize it was New Year's Eve, and that the reason that family and friends came over was to support her, but Clint had a different take. He said that he stood on his porch with binoculars looking for his daughter, watching Billy and Sean party into the night. "I don't see how you can just celebrate the new year when your daughter is missing," he said. "That should be the last thing on your mind." As the new year rolled around, the close community entered it with a somber and subdued feeling. With still no trace, sighting of or word from Haley Dunn, the lengthy and painstaking searches continued. On January 4th, 2011, Texas Rangers and the FBI came on board to look into Haley's disappearance. More than 100 billboards featuring Haley's picture and information were set up throughout Texas and other states. Haley's case gained even more attention when Nancy Grace reported on it and interviewed Billie Jean Dunn. This took the case to a new national level. The following day, January the 5th, Billy asked Sean to leave the home. This was not an uncommon thing, as the pair frequently rolled, often making up a few days later. But as the investigation was now deepening, more about Haley's home life started to come out. Reporters said that although her home life appeared to be simple and carefree from the outside, behind closed doors it was far more complex and difficult for the 13-year-old and her brother. One reporter said, Billie Jean Dunn and Sean Atkins had been on the police's radar long before Haley disappeared. Around 10 months before Haley was last seen, calls were made to police regarding a domestic disturbance between Billie and Sean. The pair both called the police to report each other, and when officers arrived at the house, the couple were argumentative and combative. Shortly after this, as was very common, Billie and Sean patched things up, and Sean moved back into the home. Billie herself said that Haley didn't see Sean as a stepdad or father figure, and they were more friends than anything else. But according to others close to Haley, she did not like Sean at all and felt afraid of him. She told her grandmother Connie that she would often see Sean's shadow in the middle of the night outside her bedroom door, and she was terrified that he would enter her room as she slept. Detectives asked Billie and Sean to undertake polygraph tests. They both had to retake the tests due to being under the influence of narcotics at the time of the first one, but Billie said this was simply an anti-anxiety medication that had been prescribed to her by her doctor. Sean Atkins walked out of the test at least twice, and on the third attempt he only completed stage 1. He said he felt it had become a witch hunt and they were trying to force him into admitting to something he hadn't done. But he did give the detective something. When he was asked about where he thought Haley might be, Sean responded in Scurry County. When asked who the police should be looking at as suspects, he simply replied, "Both of us." The test did show these two answers were truthful, but he refused to explain any further before walking out again and not completing stage 2. The results of Billie's second polygraph test and stage 1 of Sean's both showed that deception was indicated on several questions. Over the coming months, vigils and searches continued throughout Colorado City, but the volunteers were often hindered for weeks at a time due to the freezing temperatures. Colorado City Police then held a press conference. They said they were now investigating the case as if Haley was under duress or deceased. Early into the investigation, cell phone and bank records belonging to both Sean Atkins and Billie Jean Dunn were analyzed. Sean's previous place of work was also looked at. It turned out that Sean hadn't been fired from his job after all. His boss told investigators that Sean turned up for work at 6 a.m. on December 27th and bought a drink before handing in his uniform and quitting on the spot. And at 6:10 he drove away. Sean later admitted he had lied about being fired to try and avoid an argument with Billie Jean. Sean told detectives that he went straight from Snyder to his mother's house in Big Spring to use her computer to sign on to unemployment benefits. But cell phone records showed this was simply not possible. Between 6:35 and 6:56 a.m., Sean's phone pinged off of a tower in Colorado City, which was almost 50 miles away from Big Spring. The data did put him in Big Spring, but not until between the hours of 9:38 a.m. and 2:40 p.m. More cell phone tower pings also put Sean in the area of Scurry County that day. Sean told police that after visiting his mother's house, he was back in Colorado City by 3 p.m. and saw and spoke to Haley for the last time at 3:15 p.m. before she left to go to her father's. However, more mobile data confirmed that Sean was still in Big Spring at 2:40 p.m., which would have left him with just a 20-minute window to make a 40-mile drive. David, Haley's brother, said when he returned home on December 27th at around 4 p.m., he found the door was locked. After knocking for a while to try and get in, he managed to enter the home through a window. David found Sean standing in the hallway, looking like a deer in headlights. In an affidavit, Haley's uncle recalled a conversation he had had with Sean regarding her disappearance. Her uncle said he couldn't believe anyone would ever want to hurt a child. Sean replied, "It's like killing a deer." Bank records showed that after Sean picked up Billie from work at around 6 p.m., the couple stopped at 2 ATM machines, where Billie withdrew a total of $140. Billie originally told the police that the money was withdrawn to buy groceries and gas, but investigators later realized the pair used the money to buy narcotics. Concerned that Sean and Billie were potentially using narcotics inside the family home around children, detectives wanted to take a much closer look inside the house. Following this, detectives found that Billie and Sean had printed hundreds of articles found online, all of which profiled and talked about serial killers, sexual sadism, and family member murders. But Billy said this was just something they were interested in, and that plenty of people were into true crime. On January 12, 2011, it was revealed that Sean was now officially being considered a person of interest in the case. He, however, denied any involvement. David was then removed from the home by Child Protective Services. On February 24th, authorities made a shocking find. Over 100,000 images of child pornography on a memory stick were found in Billy's home and on a computer in Sean's mother's house. A laptop was also seized and held at the station. Haley's father Clint said that Sean's stepfather went to the police station demanding the laptop be returned to Sean, which it was. Arrests were not made regarding these findings, however, but it was presented to a grand jury. Sheriff Toombs said of this, on March 17, 2011, authorities went to Billy and Sean's home to talk to Sean. Billy said he wasn't there, but when officers entered the home using a warrant, they found he was hiding inside the house. Billy was then arrested and charged with lying to the police. In June 2011, Billie Jean Dunn was sentenced to a suspended 90-day jail term and a year's probation for lying about Sean's whereabouts. Billie served her probation over 250 miles away in Travis County, where she had moved with Sean. The couple did eventually break up in 2012 and went their separate ways. Billie Jean said she started to believe he was involved in her daughter's disappearance, after it was confirmed that, as well as local police, the FBI also considered him to be a person of interest. As time went on, searches for Haley began to dwindle. With each vigil that was held, tips and leads would slowly start to trickle in, only for the case to go cold again shortly after. Another year would pass with still no movement in Haley's case. On March 16, 2013, a hiker found human remains 20 miles away from Colorado City near Lake J.B. Thomas in Scurry County. Authorities did not confirm the cause of death, but Clint said he was told by investigators that Haley had most likely died from blunt force trauma. A $15,000 reward was offered for any information leading directly to the arrest of the killer or killers of Haley Dunn. Sadly, the family had to wait a painful 4 years until they could finally lay Haley to rest in January of 2017. In 2018, Clint Dunn told the media he believed his daughter was attacked, either by Sean himself or by his ex-wife Billie Jean Dunn, while Sean assisted. "They're both involved," he said. "That's not even up for discussion anymore." Clint was constantly in touch with the police, begging them to make an arrest in his daughter's case. But the investigating team still needed more. Clint Dunn's many appeals on social media caught the attention of an anonymous person who reportedly found several items belonging to Haley Dunn during late spring, early summer of 2011. The person who found the items was in middle school at the time and had no knowledge of Haley or her disappearance. Because of this, they did not tell the authorities about what they had found. In 2019, this person saw one of Clint's social media posts about Haley. It was only then they remembered what they had found. They reached out to Clint to tell him. The items and their location has not been publicly revealed, but Clint said they were found in an area that was searched countless times in the initial stages of the investigation. Private investigator Erica Morse has been working closely with Clint Dunn since his daughter disappeared. Erica said she uncovered evidence and spoke to officials, as said they had been silent since Haley's remains were found. She said they wouldn't return her calls or update anyone on whether there was any movement in the case. In October 2019, Erica said she began receiving messages from women in and around West Texas who were being harassed online by a man going by the name of Casey. Knowing this was Sean Adkins' middle name, she asked them to send the videos and photos to her that he had sent to them. These confirmed that it was him. On October 28, 2019, Erica accompanied one of the women that was being harassed by him to the police department to make a report. But they were turned away by an officer who accused the victim of fabricating the story. This pushed Erica to pen an open letter urging that if Sean wasn't arrested soon, more victims would undoubtedly follow. But 2 more years would pass, and it wouldn't be until 2021 where the case would take a big turn. In May 2021, Erica did hear back from the Mitchell County District Attorney, and they requested a meeting with her and Clint. Erica said, "During that meeting, we were assured that during the month of June, Haley's killer would be arrested. And with this, More than a decade after Haley Dunn was reported missing and 7 years after her remains were found, an arrest was finally made. District Attorney Ricky Thompson consulted with the Texas Rangers Unsolved Crimes Investigation Program regarding the case. The Texas Rangers then obtained a search warrant to get a sample of Sean's DNA. On June 13, 2021, a warrant was issued and Sean Casey Atkins was arrested and charged with the murder of Haley Dunn. Billy Dunn said, "I'm not really shocked at the news that it was Sean. Of course, you would have hoped it wasn't him because I stayed with him after she left, after Haley went missing, but I'm not surprised. And I thank God that that person has been apprehended and is going to pay for what he did here on Earth." Sean Atkins is currently being held on a $2 million bond. And as of July 2021, he has not yet entered a plea. Following Sean's arrest, Erica Morse referred to Haley's dad Clint as the driving force in the case and said that he was a template for every parent who wants to find justice for their child. Clint said, "Right now there are no words to define how I feel. We will let the child speak the truth. Thank you to everyone who searched for Haley and to those who fought tirelessly for an arrest. Hopefully true justice will come in the courtroom. This case is still ongoing, but the family hopes that this will see that justice for Haley Dunn is finally served." Case of John Thomas McGuire. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure were two sisters who lived in an orphanage. Living in an orphanage can be extremely challenging. You don't have a place of your own or time to yourself, and if you're unable to stand up for yourself, you're at risk of being bullied by kids who have been there longer. Typically, bullies target children who are loners. Sisters Amanda and Anna Marie McClure were luckier than most, because they can always protect each other. They feel comfortable being around each other and don't try to make friends with anyone. Unfortunately for Anna Marie and Anna Marie, their family secret is about to be revealed. Their father, Larry, has been convicted and imprisoned, and this news has been widely broadcast on television by various news sources. One day, the McClure sisters, Amanda and Anna Marie, helped a new girl named Meredith who was being bullied. Meredith had been living with her mother, who was addicted to drugs. After her mother's death from an overdose, Meredith was too afraid to call for help and stayed with her mother's body for a few days. It wasn't until a friend visited and found her mother's body that emergency services were called. Meredith soon became friends with the McClure sisters, and the three of them had a lot of fun together. Amanda and Anna Marie never told anyone why they were living in an orphanage. And when Meredith asked, Anna Marie made up a story about their father being a police officer who died while on duty to catch a dangerous criminal. Meredith was so impressed with Anna Marie's story that she told it to the other children at the camp. Overnight, the McClure sisters became heroes and were admired by everyone. Most of the kids in the shelter had parents who had died from substance abuse or were in prison, so the McClure sisters' story made them stand out in a positive way. The sisters' secluded life at the orphanage came to an end when all the children wanted to befriend them. However, this marked the beginning of a difficult period in their lives. A heartbreaking truth comes to light. Their father, presumed dead, is actually alive and serving a prison sentence for violence and sex crimes he committed against minors. The sisters' lives became a nightmare. However, they got a second chance when two different families decided to adopt them. This meant they would be living apart and their bond was eventually broken. Amanda, who had previously worried her adoptive parents, they were worried that she would be single forever, and that not having a biological family had a profound effect on her mental health. Amanda's adoptive parents were relieved to learn that she was in a serious relationship with a man named John Thomas McGuire, who was 38 years old. This would be his second marriage, and he had 2 sons from a previous marriage. What reassured them even more was that John seemed to be a perfect partner and always supported her. He also had a friendly relationship with his ex-wife, which was a good sign for Amanda's future with him. After serving his sentence, Larry McClure was pardoned and settled in Virginia. His first priority was to find his daughters. He went straight to Amanda's foster parents, Glenn and Alex, said hello and introduced himself. He asked to see Amanda and requested her contact information, including her address and phone number. Although Larry appeared disheveled and intimidating, with deep wrinkles and dark circles under his eyes, he didn't seem intoxicated. However, his behavior was not quite right. Glenn, Amanda's foster parent, refused Larry's request but promised to inform Amanda that her biological father was looking for her. Larry was taken aback by the term biological father, but he thanked Glenn and left. Glenn did keep his promise. He told Amanda that her father was free and was looking for her. Amanda was torn with a part of her wanting to reject her father, given his past mistakes, and another part wanting to give him another chance. Amanda reaches out to her father, Larry, after many years of separation. Amanda initiates the conversation by calling her father, who is overjoyed to hear from her. Larry asks about her well-being, and she shares that she's doing well, married, and happy. Larry was very happy for his daughter and invited her and her husband to have dinner with him. Amanda is initially uncertain about meeting her father, but he senses her hesitation and reassures her by telling her to forget the old grudges, and he has lived all these years with only one thought, to see her and Anne-Marie. This suggests that Larry has been thinking about his daughters and wants to see them again. Larry's meetings with Amanda and John led to their introduction to the world of illegal substances, which he manufactured himself in his camper. Initially, their financial situation was stable, but Larry manipulated them into funding his substance production. As their addiction deepened, they both lost their jobs. Larry persuaded John to register as a drug addict to receive $180 in state assistance. However, this amount was insufficient to support their habit, and Larry continued to exploit them for money. Meanwhile, Larry met Anne-Marie and repeated the same pattern, getting her hooked on substances and taking her money. Amanda and John's situation spiraled out of control. They accumulated huge debts, lost their house, and were forced to move into Larry's camper. John's parents, who were unaware of the situation, were told that they was going on a trip together. In reality, Amanda and John had become entrenched in a cycle of substance abuse and alcohol consumption with Larry, and John's parents have never heard from their son since. On Valentine's Day, John, still reeling from the effects of substance abuse, planned a romantic evening for his wife Amanda at the family circle. He cooked a fancy dinner, inviting Larry and Anne-Marie to join them. However, under the prolonged influence of the drugs, a disturbing situation unfolded. Amanda and Larry, who were supposed to be father and daughter, began to develop an inappropriately close relationship. Sadly, John was unaware of this, and as a result, he became redundant in their twisted relationship. During the meal, John spoke very many warm words to Amanda, which made Larry extremely anxious. As the tension increased, Larry interrupted John's speech and asked if he could be completely honest with his wife. John agreed, and Larry suggested a game. They tied John's legs and instructed him to answer truthfully about his life. Initially, the questions covering topics like childhood and school. However, under the influence of drugs, Larry began to accuse John of being an undercover FBI agent. When John denied this, they hit him, although John begging for mercy, but he was ultimately struck on the head with a bottle of wine, the same wine he had brought for the family dinner. Over the course of 2 days, Larry, Amanda, and Anne-Marie subjected John to torture while using illegal substances. When they thought it was time to end things, Amanda put a black bag over John's head and tightened it around his neck until he stopped breathing. They buried John in the backyard and then celebrated the engagement of Larry and Amanda, father and daughter, with more drugs and alcohol. On the 3rd day, their mental health worsened. They began to hallucinate, seeing John's ghost, hearing police sirens, and imagining that the ground where they buried John was disturbed, as if he might escape and report everything to the authorities. The situation was chaotic, but the father and daughters still decided to take more drastic action. They dug up John's body, checked his pulse, and examined his pupils' reaction to light, even though he showed clear signs of decomposition. This, however, did not convince them that he was truly gone. In a frantic bid to prevent John from coming back to life, they dismembered his body with a wood axe and drove aspen stakes into each piece. They then buried the remains in different locations and covered them with lime to accelerate the decomposition process. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda got married. To conceal their relationship, Larry changed his name. The new family aimed to start afresh, moving to Kentucky. They promised each other to stop using illegal substances for good. To avoid suspicion, They even hung an American flag over their front door, just like their neighbors did. By this time, John's ex-wife and parents were becoming increasingly concerned about his lack of contact. In 2019, John's mother even filed a police report regarding his disappearance. Meanwhile, Larry failed to inform the police about his move to another state, which violated his probation terms and led to his return to prison. Larry's mental state deteriorated, especially after long-term substance abuse and alcohol use. This sent him into rehab, leading to anxiety and confusion between what was real and what wasn't, reflected in his disturbing behavior. Larry suspected that the parole violation was merely a pretext for authorities to search his backyard for John's remains. He felt an urgent need to contact Amanda or Anna Marie and instruct them to dig up the body parts and rebury them far from their home. Since all prisoner calls are monitored, he had to find a discreet way to communicate this information. Larry meticulously prepared a speech to convey his message, but ultimately, he was denied the opportunity to make calls. Unable to cope with the situation any longer, he decided to confess to the police. Larry thought that if he confessed to the murder before being charged, he might avoid the death penalty. He even considered blaming his daughters to make his situation better. However, the police officer did not believe him. First of all, what murder? What body parts were buried in the backyard? What crazy idea did this man have? Legally, they had to verify his claims. Initially, the police planned to conduct an investigation. They took his statement, and they found out that John was indeed missing. Police unit was sent to Larry's house. First on the scene, investigators found evidence that Larry had mentioned, confirming all of the criminals. The McClure sisters were quickly apprehended. Amanda and Anna Marie were in shock, unable to believe that their father and stepfather could confess to such a brutal murder. They were even more stunned to learn that Larry was trying to portray himself as an innocent bystander, claiming in his testimony that it was his daughters who killed John and he was just unwittingly involved in the crime. As the investigation unfolded, each the family McClure member sought to protect themselves and convinced the police that their involvement was purely accidental. This situation was particularly difficult for John's relatives because there was no body, only remains were found. Those remains had to be carefully collected by forensic experts, transported to his parents, and ultimately buried in a closed coffin. It has been mentioned many that John was a kind person. Despite the challenges they faced, his parents were able to arrange for his burial. Some friends contributed financially, while others assisted with transportation and funeral planning. John was laid to rest at a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, a member of the McClure family posted on Facebook, claiming it was a message from John. The post stated that he was going on a long trip and would be out of touch, asking friends not to worry about his absence. This raised suspicions that the family McClure had planned to kill John, and they wanted to deceive others to avoid causing panic. Despite the severity of the crime, but during the trial, Larry and Amanda received an additional 6 months in their sentence due to their illegal father-daughter marriage, which is prohibited in the state. The trial began and Larry testified. He revealed that he had always felt remorse for his children throughout his life. He explained that when they were very young, he committed a serious crime that led to them being placed in an orphanage. Their birth mother had abandoned them, and he was the only one left feeling heartbroken. Larry expressed deep gratitude towards the families who adopted his children, mentioning that he had even prayed for their adoptive parents in churches. He desperately wanted to make up for the years gone by with them and admitted that this might be why he made the choices he did. He describes John as a wonderful young man and expresses his grief for him. He says that if he could change the past, he would, but emphasizes that no one can bring the dead back to life. He mentions his deep love for his daughter Amanda. However, he notes that Amanda does not care about John. Her only concern is taking money from his account. He questions whether anyone would consider killing someone for $180 and that people should recognize Amanda for what she was. He called her a monster, not a human. He stated that he, Amanda, and Marie were addicted to drugs and that they deserved to be punished for their actions. He expressed his desire to speak to the jury and said that regardless of his sentence, He was aware of his health problems and believed that he might not live more than 10 years. He expressed regret for John's passing and again apologized to all of John's loved ones. The trial dragged on because the defendants kept changing their statements about whether they killed John or not. Amanda, unable to bear the long trial, made a deal with investigators. In return, she was assured that she would be charged with involuntary manslaughter at her next trial. Larry then gave another speech. He said, "The four of us bought the ingredients to make illegal drugs. Amanda came to me and shared her wish to get revenge on John. The reality is that John, while high on drugs, assaulted Anna Marie, which led to her becoming pregnant. For me, I needed to regain my daughter's trust after years apart. I felt I could not refuse their demands. I often blamed myself for what had happened and thought about ending my life. But I wondered, why should I suffer when this crime was committed by them?" After Larry's speech, it was John's family's turn to speak. John's mother cried uncontrollably and could not express her emotions. She expressed, "Even if one day I can forgive the McClure family, I will never forget what they did. I also hope I live long enough to see one of them die before me." Next, John's children spoke, cursing the killers and declaring that they would never forgive them. The judge delivered the final verdict, sentencing Larry McClure to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the sentence for Amanda was revealed, her adoptive parents regretted telling her that her biological father was looking for her. They had always raised her with the freedom to make her own choices, unaware that this freedom could lead to such dire consequences. At the time the verdict was announced, Amanda stated that her father's jealousy was the root cause of the situation. Her adoptive parents pleaded with the judge to consider that Amanda's involvement in the crime was heavily influenced by Larry's negative impact, asserting that she would never have committed such a violent act otherwise. However, the prosecutors argued that the murder was a planned act, suggesting that Amanda and Larry were conspiring to be together as a couple. The initial hearing focused on Amanda, who was sentenced to 40 years. The judge said Amanda could serve only 20 years. During Anna Marie's sentencing, she attempted to speak out against John's murder. However, she felt pressured by her father and sister to do what they wanted, and she only attended Larry and Amanda's wedding out of concern for her own future. Ultimately, Anna Marie was sentenced to 40 years. 61-year-old Carol and Reggie Sumner originally met in school, and the young pair shared a brief romance before breaking up after graduation. It wouldn't be until later in life they would reconnect, fall in love, and marry. After serving time in the Navy, Reggie got married and found work with the railroad. Carol also got married twice and had children of her own. But she had difficult marriages. The first ended in divorce and the second was extremely abusive. Carol filed a restraining order against her second husband, but one day he showed up at her house, pulled a gun on her, and shot her 6 times. Carol survived, but her husband was chased by police and cornered. He then pulled the trigger and shot himself. Rhonda, Carol's daughter, took care of her mother after the traumatizing ordeal. She was only 10 years old at the time, but as soon as she could, Carol got back into work, holding down multiple jobs to support her family. 40 years passed before Reggie and Carol met again. In 2000, Carol was working at a cable television company when a phone call came in. On the end of the line was none other than her high school sweetheart, Reggie. It was like nothing had changed, and the pair quickly became inseparable. A year later, they married in Carol's home. They soon made the move to Jacksonville, Florida. Reggie decided that moving there would be the best thing for his health. Carol agreed, and they began preparing for it. They sold their Chevrolet Lamina to Tiffany Cole, one of their neighbors. The Sumners were very close to Tiffany, having known her since she was a little girl, and they treated her as part of the family. When Tiffany's father became ill, the Sumners stepped in to help, and many said they supported Tiffany like she was their own granddaughter. Tiffany started making monthly payments to the Sumners for the car they had given to her. Once they moved, she would regularly drive to Florida to give them the money and spend some time with them. In early July 2005, Rhonda tried several times to get hold of her mother and stepfather, but her calls were going unanswered. It wasn't long before Rhonda decided she had to make the 4-hour journey to Jacksonville to find out what was wrong. They all spoke every day on the phone, and after almost a week with no contact, Rhonda knew this was troubling. When she reached the house, the couple were nowhere to be seen. On July 10th, Rhonda made the call to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department to report the couple as missing. When law enforcement arrived, they noticed their car was gone and the front door was unlocked. Food was left on the stove and plates and cutlery were left out too. It looked as if the couple had just picked up and left at a moment's notice. Carol's phone was still plugged in on charge and her daily planner she never left without was on the table. The pair had also left their dog Mikey as well as all their medication. And Reggie weren't in good health and departing without any of their medication was a huge cause for concern. Carol had been undergoing debilitating chemotherapy for liver cancer which stemmed from hepatitis C, something she had contracted whilst undergoing a blood transfusion after being shot by her second husband. She also suffered from diabetes and osteoporosis. Reggie also suffered badly with diabetes and osteoporosis, and due to a break in one of his legs, was virtually confined to a wheelchair. The couple also weighed very little. Everyone was alarmed, and the media quickly ran with the story to get the word out there. Detectives immediately began an investigation, which started inside the house. Financial statements had been left out, and they contacted the banks to see if anything had been withdrawn. They put out a statewide alert for the couple's missing car, and wasn't long before they got a hit. Just 2 days later, the abandoned Lincoln Town car was found almost 50 miles away from Jacksonville. The car was unlocked and there were no keys left in the ignition. 5 hours after the car had been found, the police received a bizarre phone call. Police began trying to locate where the call was coming from and who the number was linked to. Another line of inquiry were the bank records. These showed that the couple's card was also active and being used to withdraw money from various ATM machines. Security cameras had captured the people using the card, and the information garnered from the phone analysis told police exactly who to look at. The phone record showed that the number had been used to call a car rental company. The car that was rented matched the car that was seen on some of the CCTV at the ATM machines. The people posing as the missing couple on the phone were none other than Tiffany Cole, Carol and Reggie's old neighbor, and her boyfriend, Michael James Jackson. Through GPS and the rental of the Mazda, the police were directed to a motel in South Carolina. 2 rooms had been rented out under Tiffany's name, and there were 3 people there: Tiffany, Michael, and another man, 18-year-old Alan Lindell Wade. The trio were questioned straight away. Tiffany admitted to participating in a robbery at the Sumners' home, but she and Michael said they knew nothing about where the couple were. Tiffany then suddenly threw a 4th name into the mix: Bruce Kent Nixon. But how and why had this come to be? And where were Carol and Reggie Sumner? When police finally located Bruce Nixon, he told them a shocking and disturbing story. Karen and Reggie had said that Tiffany was always welcome in their home and told her their door was always open. 24-year-old Tiffany and her boyfriend of 2 months, Michael, who was 23, traveled to Jacksonville to visit their friend, Alan Lindell Wade. While they were there, the Summers happily agreed to give them a place to sleep. During Tiffany and Michael's stay, the Summers mentioned that they had recently closed the deal on their South Carolina property for just short of $100,000. This would set in motion a frightening and calculated scheme. Michael took note of all the couple's belongings and furnishings in their home and began plotting a sick and twisted robbery. Initially, Michael considered breaking into the home while the couple were out of town, but the plan then evolved to them robbing and then killing the couple. They first thought about injecting the pair with a lethal dose of medication. However, that idea was dismissed, and they agreed on what would be an unthinkable plan. A month before the Summoners went missing, Alan rented a car to drive to Jacksonville to visit his friend, 18-year-old Bruce Kent Nixon. He told Bruce he had plans to rob someone's house, but didn't give any more details. Bruce stole some shovels from around his neighborhood. They all drove across state lines into Georgia to a remote, wooded location and dug a hole 6 foot deep and 4 foot wide. Alan and Bruce dug, assisted by Michael, while Tiffany held the flashlight. Purchases were also made for disposable gloves, plastic wraps, duct tape, and a fake gun. On July 8th at around 10 p.m., the group of 4 left in a rental car, a Mazda RX-8, and drove to the Summoners' home. Tiffany and Michael waited in the car while Alan and Bruce knocked on the door. Carol answered. The pair said they urgently needed to borrow a phone as they were having car trouble. Carol, wanting to help, let them in straight away. As soon as they entered, they aimed the fake gun at the couple. Carol and Reggie, dressed only in their pajamas, were completely terrified and weak due to their health problems. The summoners cooperated fully, telling the men they could take whatever they wanted as long as they didn't hurt them. Despite this, Reggie and Carol were restrained with duct tape over their eyes, mouth, hands, and feet. Alan also disabled the telephone lines. While the couple were immobile, Alan and Bruce phoned Michael, who was waiting outside. Michael then entered the home and started searching for financial statements. He also took Reggie's prized coin collection. Both Bruce and Alan forced the summoners into the trunk of their own Lincoln Town car. After this, Michael and Alan drove the Lincoln out to the woods, to the pre-dug hole. Bruce later said that when the trunk opened, the couple had managed to become free of the duct tape and were clutching each other tightly, holding hands and praying. Michael told Bruce to cover their eyes with the tape again, saying it was only a mind thing. He said he didn't want to see their eyes as he killed them. After forcing Carol and Reggie out of the car, they got the pin to the couple's bank card. Carol then had her jewelry snatched off before she and Reggie were shoved into the hole next to each other. Carol and Reggie Sumner were then buried alive. Tiffany and Bruce were waiting in the hired Mazda just up the road. The group then drove the summoners' vehicle to Sanderson, Florida, where they set about removing the evidence and wiping down the inside of the Lincoln before dumping it. They later returned to the couple's home to steal a computer and some more jewelry before checking into a hotel. They spent the night in a limousine, taking pictures with the stolen goods, showing off the cash, and drinking bottles of champagne. Through tracking the group via cell phone data and CCTV, on July 14th, just 4 days after Rhonda had reported her mother and stepfather missing, police apprehended Alan, Tiffany, and Michael in a South Carolina hotel. Inside their rooms, they found Carol's car keys, a suitcase containing the financial documents, receipts for items that had been purchased using the couple's money, Reggie's driver's license, credit cards, and checkbooks. In Tiffany's car, detectives also found Reggie's coin collection. When Bruce Nixon was located just a day later, he admitted to everything and was more than willing to tell the detectives exactly what had happened and what each individual person's involvement had been. He also told the police he would take them to where the Sumners had been buried. An excavation was carried out and law enforcement found Carol and Reggie Sumner crouched under the dirt, holding each other. The medical examiner discovered that they had inhaled the dirt until they eventually died of mechanical asphyxiation. The earth they were buried under had compressed their lungs, smothering them. Bruce told the police that he had helped dig the hole, but only found out the following day that the plan was not only to rob the couple, but to bury them alive. Tiffany also claimed that she believed the hole was being dug to hide the stolen goods in. But Bruce said this was nonsense and Tiffany knew exactly what was going to happen to Reggie and Carol. He said that she was the sole connection between everyone involved that night. She also told them all the couple's schedules, and she knew they would be home at that time after a long day at the doctor's. Bruce Nixon was arrested first. Tiffany Cole, Michael James Jackson, and Alan Lindell Wade were subsequently arrested too, and all four were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, armed kidnapping, and armed robbery. While in jail, Michael made a phone call to his grandmother. She read him a newspaper article about Bruce's cooperation with the police. This only added more to the already strong case against them. In court, Carol's daughter asked them not to sentence Alan to death. She also asked for leniency for Bruce, saying that both men had been manipulated by Michael. She said they were too young and were on drugs at the time of the murders. They were used in the worst way. Solving 2 deaths with more deaths does not make me happy. I know in my heart that my mom and Reggie would have felt the same way. Bruce pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and agreed to testify against the other 3. Following this, he was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Michael and Alan received the death penalty. Tiffany's trial took place in October 2007. During the trial, she stated that she had only agreed to the burglary and was totally unaware of the plot to kidnap and kill the couple. She testified that although she did help dig the hole in the ground, She had no idea what it would be used for. She claimed that even as they drove to the wooded area, she had no knowledge that the summoners were bound in the trunk of the Lincoln. Prosecutors weren't settling for this account. They protested that she was the sole link between the group and the only person that tied everything together was her. Tiffany didn't believe that she could be guilty of first-degree murder because she didn't personally kill the summoners. But under Florida law, someone who participates in a crime can be found equally culpable for a murder even if they didn't directly cause the death. Her defense attorney argued that Michael controlled and manipulated Tiffany during their short-lived relationship, and he was the real mastermind behind what had happened that night. The defense argued that her low intelligence level and mental health issues should also be taken into consideration. But despite hers and her defense's pleas of innocence, the jury took just 90 minutes to deliberate and they ultimately found her guilty. Their verdict was 9-3 for the death penalty. Tiffany is one of the youngest women on death row in the United States. One of the prosecutors on the case, Jay Plotkin, recalled, Tiffany later asked for in a letter she to them, that could be more heinous, atrocious or cruel, or more painful and vile. Tiffany later asked the families for forgiveness in the letter she wrote to them. Some members of the family say they have forgiven her for their own sense of peace. Alan Wade later revealed to the media he had met a woman online named Sigrid, whom he married and had a child with. Sigrid had been writing to inmates on death row when she started talking to Alan, and this sparked a romantic relationship. Despite conjugal visits not being permitted at Union Correctional Institution where Alan is being held, Sigrid somehow managed to get pregnant. A 2016 U.S. Supreme Court ruling found that Florida's prior law permitting non-unanimous jury verdicts and death penalty cases actually violated the Sixth Amendment, prompting Florida to re-sentence more than 150 people. The state court said anyone sentenced after a 2002 ruling could now be eligible for a new hearing and possibly a new sentence. And because of this, in 2017, the Florida Supreme Court ordered a new sentence hearing for Tiffany Cole. Michael James Jackson was previously sentenced to death with an 8-4 majority ruling, and Alan Lindell Wade was sentenced with an 11-1 majority ruling. Neither had unanimous verdicts, so they will likely get new hearings as well. Some days when Rhonda's phone rings, she said she often forgets and for a second hopes her mother is on the line. Reggie and Carol Sumner had found happiness together after years apart and after so many years of pain and troubles in their own lives. They were a kind, generous, and loving couple. All they wanted to do was spend their later years together. Their caring and giving nature will always be remembered by their family, and Rhonda keeps Carol and Reggie's ashes in an urn at her home, so that the couple can stay together forever. Case of Lin family. Min Lin and Yoon Lin's romance began in the late 1980s when they met at an Australian university. They both came from China and had moved to Australia to further their studies. Min had completed her bachelor's degree and was doing an internship while Yoon participated in a student exchange program. They met each other after meeting accidentally in the university hallway. After graduating, they got married and settled in North Epping, Sydney, where their love continued to grow into a strong, close-knit family. Min and Yoon had their first child, Brenda Lin, in August 1994. She was mostly known as Brenda. Their son, Henry, was born in 1997, and their youngest child, Terry, was born in 2000. At the start of the 2000s, Min and Yoon decided to start a business, opening a small newsroom. Through their hard work, it became a successful news agency with a publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lin family's business success had brought them economic security, a spacious house, a luxury car, and good education for their children. Min had handled business affairs, while Yoon had focused on taking care of their home and children. Neighbors had respected the Lin family for their hard work and kindness. As parents, Min and Yoon had been appreciated for their care and love for their children. They had never quarreled. Their children had been very obedient and close-knit. Brenda, the eldest daughter, had stood out for her beauty, good academic performance, and kindness towards animals. Henry and Terry, two sons, had been both active and loved sports, especially soccer. As the Lin family had settled into life in Australia and their assets had increased, they had begun bringing relatives from China to live with them. In the early 2000s, Min's parents had been the first to move to North Epping and had helped with childcare. A few years later, Yun's parents also moved to Sydney suburb with Min and Yun buying them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lin family, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lin family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. In late 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy, and her husband, Robert, moved to Australia in search of better opportunities. They had visited before and briefly lived in Melbourne, but had returned to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert was a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. He and his wife invested all their savings in a restaurant in Sydney, but the business struggled and eventually closed. Robert's subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed due to his lack of business skills and financial management experience. Lin's family had a habit of meeting every Friday night. Their last family gathering took place on July 17, 2009, at Kathy and Min's parents' home. The next morning, July 18th, the Lin family store had not been open, making longtime customers feel surprised and confused. This sudden closure had raised their concerns. One of them tried to contact Min multiple times but was unsuccessful, so they called Min's sister Kathy to see if she knew what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother never closed the shop without making arrangements first. Kathy tried to call Min and Yoon, but they didn't answer. She also tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert were worried, so they decided to visit Min's house to make sure everything was okay. They arrived around 9 a.m. and saw the family car. They went to the house. The front door was unlocked, but there was no sign of Min or his family inside. Kathy went upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, she was shocked by what she saw. The room was covered in blood, including the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yim Lin's body was on the floor near the bed, and she had been severely mutilated. Kathy screamed and stumbled backward, was shocked by the gruesome scene. In the room next to where Irene slept, a terrible scene took place. Irene lay motionless on the bed, her face beaten and bruised. The bedrooms of Henry, 12, and Terry, 9, also revealed horrifying scenes. Both were brutally beaten to death. Their bodies were found in separate corners of the room. Min Lin's body was found in his bedroom, covered with a blanket soaked in blood. He was killed in the same way as his family. It seems he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and then the 2 boys. Kathy immediately contacted emergency services. After Kathy's urgent call, Robert left to fetch the Lin's parents, who lived about 10 kilometers from the crime scene. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, encountering what they described as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had witnessed. Tragically, the Lin family members were all killed. Each person died from multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object similar to a hammer. However, the crime weapon was not found at the scene. The initial examination of the crime scene did not reveal any important clues. The killer did not leave the murder weapon behind, and they did not take any valuables or money. This suggests that the main goal was to kill the Lin family, not to steal from them. At first, investigators thought there might be multiple attackers because it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower so many people. However, evidence showed that the children were awake during the attack and tried to escape. There were blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Oddly, all adult victims had head injuries and showed signs of strangulation. Investigators found identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a tread pattern. Although they could not identify the shoe brand, they determined the shoe size. No fingerprints were found, suggesting the killer where killers wore gloves. Initially, the police had no leads or theories about the perpetrator's identity. Friends and neighbors of the Lin family all said that the family had no known enemies, making the motive for the brutal massacre unclear. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lin, the eldest child and now sole survivor of the Lin family, was attending school in New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She learned about the incident through social media and initially did not believe it was related to her family, but the truth devastated her. Brenda soon received a call from her Aunt Kathy, who tearfully confirmed the devastating news. Brenda was immediately flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert met her at the airport. She then moved in with them, as her family's home was closed off as a crime scene. The following day was taken to the police station, overcome with grief, to be questioned. However, she had no new information to share, stressing that her family had no enemies and hadn't noticed anything unusual before her trip. After her family's passing, Brenda inherited a significant fortune, including property and the family business. Since she was still a minor and in school, her guardians, Kathy and Robert, took on the responsibility of managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her caregivers. Robert even threatened to take legal action if the grandparents sought custody, claiming they were too old to care for a teenager. The matter was eventually resolved, with Brenda remaining in the care of her aunt and uncle. The Lynn's shop and publishing business reopened under new management after a temporary closure. However, Brenda had not yet taken over the business operations. Robert began reviewing the family's financial records, including bank accounts, savings, and real estate. Beside that, experts thoroughly investigated the crime scene, documenting every detail, but no concrete leads were found. They believed the killer acted alone and entered the house quietly, possibly through and with a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinctive tread pattern and likely used a hammer as the lethal weapon, which was never found. The killer wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints or foreign DNA behind. One notable detail was the presence of blood stains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the killings occurred, indicating the killer's bloodied gloves had touched them. However, there were no blood stains on Brenda's room doorknob, suggesting the killer knew she was not present. The Lynn family tragedy received extensive media coverage. However, with no concrete evidence or suspects, numerous implausible theories surfaced. Speculation about the family's supposed vast wealth leading to their murder. As the investigation had stalled, no suspects had emerged for the probe. The theory of a robbery had eventually been abandoned because the killer had left money and valuables intact, suggesting the sole motive had been to kill family members. Furthermore, the fact that the house had lost power on the night of the murder suggested that the murderer had been someone who was familiar with the location of the electrical panel. The attacker's ability to control the house in darkness showed that he had prior knowledge of the house's layout. When reviewing the case, an investigator replayed Kathy's emergency call, looking for missed clues. An important hint was detected in the recording. The recording captured Kathy's frantic attempts to explain the situation, her words interrupted by crying and sobbing. At the end of the call, Kathy mentioned her husband's name and talked to him in Cantonese. This piqued the investigators' interest, causing them to translate her words. The translation revealed that Kathy was pleading with Robert not to leave Kathy home alone. This was significant since Robert had left Kathy at the scene of the crime to pick up her parents, despite the potential danger. With 5 people brutally murdered and the killer possibly still inside, Robert's calm aroused suspicion, as if he already knew for certain that Kathy was safe. The police finally identified Robert as the main suspect. A crucial discovery was that Robert had a key to Min's house, which had been given to Robert shortly before the tragedy. However, Robert never mentioned this during questioning, and his wife Kathy was unaware that Min had given him the key. It was Brenda who unintentionally revealed this important information to investigators. Further investigation showed that Robert's claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor was false. Although he had a medical degree, he had never had a stable job in the field. There were rumors that he had fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish a successful career and wasted his remaining savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became idle, relying on his wife's income. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lynn family's estate. His first move was to force Yun's parents out of their home, which Min had bought for them. Although the house remained in Min's name, Min and Kathy's parents were still allowed to stay in their own home that was also purchased for them. Based on this information, investigators suspected he had a long-standing plot to usurp Min family property, money, and profitable business. However, the police could not arrest Robert yet due to a lack of concrete evidence. Through a combination of interrogation, surveillance, and other methods, the investigation team was granted permission to install hidden cameras in the Robert household. They hoped to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unexpected revelation from Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned Robert's preference for a specific brand of shoes. A few years ago, Robert bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers that he really liked. He had worn out one pair and thrown it away, but kept the other pair at home. What's important to note is that Robert's shoe size, 9.5, matched the size of the shoes worn by the killers. The crucial evidence was caught on a hidden camera, which showed Robert deliberately destroying the box that held the remaining pair of shoes. A search warrant was issued for Robert's home. During the search, police found a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers with the same pattern as the pattern collected at the crime scene. In the garage, they discovered a small blood stain, which was later confirmed by a forensic examiner to be a blood stain containing DNA from all 5 victims of the Lin family, linking it to the crime scene. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, Robert was officially arrested. He denied involvement, claiming the blood stains in his garage appeared after returning from Lin's house following the tragedy. He also downplayed the importance of the sneakers, saying they were new and he threw away the old shoes. While in prison awaiting trial, Robert shared a cell with a number of informants whom the police had arranged. During a conversation, he confessed to carefully planning the crime and covering his tracks. He bought the weapon in a store without surveillance cameras and gave his wife tea so she wouldn't wake up while he was committing the crime. He removed the hammer, shoes, gloves, and clothes so police would never find them. At trial, Robert denied everything. The only evidence against him is what the informant said and some indirectly clues. The jury failed to find Robert guilty, and he was released on bail in December 2015. But when the trial resumed in June 2016, another informant said Robert had confessed to being haunted by Brenda since she was 13 years old. Brenda was questioned again and tearfully said Robert forced her to have sex when she first moved in. She kept silent about the abuse for years because she was afraid of what Robert might do. With this new information and other evidence, Robert was officially convicted of all charges. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each murder. All of his appeals were rejected. Today's story takes us to Springfield, Colorado. Located in Colorado's southeast corner, Springfield is the home to a population of over 1,000 people. Known as a farming and ranching community, this statutory town is the most populated town situated on the county seat of Baca County. But Springfield had no clue that a mystery on its land in 1988 would take the next 34 years to get solved. On June 3, 1988, Baca County Sheriff's Office responded to a call from a Colorado farm. A local farmer reported to the Baca County Sheriff's Office that he had found what he believed to be human remains on his farm, located approximately 20 miles southeast of the town of Springfield, Baca County, Colorado. The open field was passed by truck drivers on a regular basis. When then Sheriff Willard Goff and then Coroner Robert Morrow, along with other deputies, searched the scene, they confirmed the remains as human remains. On the property, they found scattered human remains which were in a degraded skeletal condition. The remains consisted of what was most of the human skeleton. The bones were not all there, and what was there was white and bleached, with part of the spine still connected. The remains were then sent to the coroner's office for an autopsy, while the investigators scanned the area for clues. Unfortunately, they could not find any evidence that could lead them to unmask the victim's identity. People from the Baca County Coroner's Office, as well as the Sheriff's Office, spent several days searching the farm with the assistance of the farm operator. They documented several items found on the property and screened the soil in the area of the search of potential evidence. However, Nothing was found to be able to identify the remains or to assist in determining how or why the person had died or how they could have ended up in the farmer's field. The remains were unrecognizable and authorities tried in vain to come up with any significant information that could lead them to unmask the identity of the individual. Forensic examination concluded the remains belonged to a female victim who was believed to be between the ages of 19 and 24. She stood between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches and weighed around 130 pounds. Her hair was brown, but her eye color could not be determined due to the remains being in a degraded condition. She was wearing gray corduroy Levi jeans with the leg cuffs hemmed up to 27.5-inch inseam, a beige-colored winter coat with a white synthetic fur collar and 4-inch fur cuffs, and a 34B bra. A single quarter dating to 1986 was found in her pocket. Forensics could not confirm the ancestry of the victim. She bore traits of Hispanic or Latino people, Native American and European people. She had extensive dental work including 2 silver cast crowns, 1 upper and 1 lower on the left side, which indicated that she might be from Mexico or had lived along the border of Mexico. The internals of her body suggest that she might have never given birth. It was also concluded that she had died approximately 1 to 3 years before her remains were discovered, and the nature of her death was ruled as suspicious, most likely a homicide. As the victims remained unidentified, authorities at the same time were unable to track down any of her relatives to hand down her remains to her family. With the unavailability of a name, the victim was named as the Baca County Jane Doe. In 2005, Jane Doe, along with copies of case information, was buried in the Springfield Cemetery, while all the original records of her death were kept at the sheriff's and coroner's office. Despite not having any significant evidence about the death of the Baca County Jane Doe, authorities did not give up in their attempts to solve the case. Over the years, multiple attempts were made to identify her. Dental impressions were made and dental records of the victim were submitted to the National Crime Information Center to try to obtain a match within the missing persons database. DNA samples were also taken and submitted for analysis even though DNA was in its infancy at the time when it came to identifying victims. An anthropological study was conducted on the remains to gather information about any possible evidence on the body that could lead to its identification. Investigators also developed a facial reconstruction to get an idea of what the person might have looked like. Even the filings in her teeth were analyzed in an attempt to determine the previous location of the deceased before her death. Many possible matches, including potential dental matches, were received. But as the investigation progressed, each potential match was ruled out after comparison with the remains. Investigators also held press conferences sharing details about this case and urging the public to come forward with any knowledge they might have about the victim. But nothing was drawn from that and no one came forward. Despite the diligent efforts of the investigators, the deceased remained unidentified and the case turned cold. After remaining unsolved for over 3 decades, finally in 2021, the case got unexpected assistance and was sent in a new direction. In May 2021, the Baca County Sheriff's and Coroner's Office were contacted by an investigative intern working for the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The person asked for permission to submit the data from the 1988 Baca County Jane Doe case and to name us, a national database of missing and unidentified persons, as well as a resource center for families to find their missing relatives, which was launched in 2007. It did not bring an immediate result, but the case got renewed attention, which also brought up other resources. Combining their resources with the Baca County Coroner's Office, Baca County Sheriff Aaron Shiplett hoped to get a breakthrough in the case of this Jane Doe. Multiple people from the Sheriff's Office and Coroner's Office spent time combining the relevant case information from both agencies' case files into the Sheriff's Office database using the original documents, which were almost 34 years old. After uploading all the information, several detectives were appointed to analyze it. On the other hand, Shiplett was also trying to contact a genetic genealogy lab, as he was hopeful that advances in technology could potentially identify Jane Doe. In July 2021, the Baca County Coroner's Office made contact with Solved by DNA, which is a Castle Rock-based genetic genealogy company, in an attempt to identify the Baca County Jane Doe. This company possesses expertise in investigative genetic genealogy and advanced DNA testing of crime scene DNA or DNA from unidentified human remains. After developing a DNA profile from the unidentified DNA, they used traditional genealogical research to predict whether a suspect or an unidentified person may fit into a family tree based on numerous DNA databases. However, an obstruction was already on its way to solving the case. Although Jane Doe had her DNA records in the original files of investigations, due to the limitations in technology available at the time, those records were not adequate to do a familial DNA study, and new DNA samples were needed to conduct the investigation. On December 13, 2021, an investigative team of the Baca County Sheriff's Office led by Shiplett exhumed the remains of Jane Doe from the Springfield Cemetery and obtained new samples of familial DNA testing and research before reburying remains. The samples were then delivered to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation in Pueblo for analysis. After a brief analysis, the CBI entered the new DNA profile into NAMUS. In August of 2022, the Baca County Sheriff's Office and Baca County Coroner's Office learned about a possible familial DNA match. Solved by DNA notified the Sheriff's Office that they had been able to locate a person through their DNA research that could be a possible family member of Jane Doe. The Baca County Sheriff's Office soon began their process of tracking down and contacting several other possible family members of the match, and was able to get them in touch with Solved by DNA. Solved by DNA then requested them to submit their own DNA for analysis, which was necessary to determine if the Baca County Jane Doe was related to them. As family members agreed, Solved by DNA initiated the process of obtaining their DNA for the necessary research. A month later, on September 26, 2022, the Baca County Sheriff's Office was notified by NAMUS regarding their discovery of a separate familial DNA match for Jane Doe. The match was linked to a person who lived in Texas and had submitted their DNA to the McAllen Police Department in Texas in 2004 in an attempt to search for missing mother, Nora Alia Castillo. Nora's daughter, Josie Castillo, was the one who submitted her DNA to the McAllen Police Department in the process of locating her missing mother. The missing person report of Nora Castillo was filed in 1996, even though she had been missing since 1986 or 1987. According to the report of the McAllen Police Department, the last contact with Nora Castillo was a collect call from somewhere in Colorado shortly before her disappearance. After further DNA testing and analysis, the identity of Baca County Jane Doe was finally confirmed as Nora Castillo. Josie Castillo could not spend much time with her mom while growing up since she lived with her dad. Despite that, she remembered her being an outgoing person who loved to laugh and smile. But Josie also remembered how social services got involved when she was 6 and her sister Crystal was 3. At a time when Nora was going through some issues, Nora attempted to get them while they lived in New Mexico with their dad. But getting into some trouble led her to the jail in Hobbs, New Mexico. From there, it said that she went to a mental institution and that was the last time anyone ever saw from her. 4 years after their mother's mysterious disappearance, the daughters wondered about Nora's whereabouts and how she could be found. The Baca County Sheriff's Office stated, almost 36 years, the family of Nora Alia Castillo finally knows where she is. Along with Josie, her sister Crystal was also notified about their mother's final fate. Although their hope of ever getting their mother alive was shattered, they were happy to have a sense of closure after all these years of waiting. All this came out of absolutely nowhere, and it's a lot, Crystal stated. Despite seeking answers regarding what led to her mother's untimely demise, Josie said she can now go to sleep at night knowing where her mom is thanks to genetic genealogy. My heart is healing. There's a healing process now, Josie stated. Nora's family has since been able to visit Nora's last resting place and even the location where she was discovered. However, authorities are still unaware of what happened to lead to Castillo's death. The details of how Nora Alia Castillo died or why she was in Colorado are still under investigation. For now, this case is still being investigated as a potential homicide. Baca County Deputy Coroner Everett Brissendine said, "We're hoping we would get some kind of tip that would lead us to knowing more about why and how she died." After 3 decades of remaining as a Jane Doe, Nora finally reunited with her family, but even in death, she is still deprived of justice. If anyone out there knows anything, do not hesitate to come forward, as your information could be invaluable to unmask the murderer. Do you think Nora's daughters would have ever known the fate of their mother without the miracle of genetic genealogy? Case of Sharon Collins on September 26, 2006. Police were alerted to a break-in at a business in Westgate Business Park, Ennis Company, Clare. The office belonged to Downs and Howard, a property investment firm owned by Howard and his sons. He was believed to be wealthy. The police received a call about a robbery in rural Ireland, which unfortunately was not uncommon. However, upon arrival, they found the crime scene to be unusual. There were no signs of forced entry, such as broken doors or windows. The office locks had been opened with keys, and the alarm had been deactivated with the code the previous night, at 9:24 p.m. Stolen items included a laptop, a desktop computer CPU, computer cables, and an old Irish money poster. Strangely, the safe in the office was left untouched, adding to the mystery. Later that evening, the police got a call from Robert Howard, one of Howard's sons, reporting that a strange man had shown up at his house and demanded money. What began as a basic robbery call was now unraveling into an unusual and bizarre story in Irish criminal history. Just days after the robbery, a suspect, Robert, who was an Egyptian national living in Las Vegas, was arrested in Ennis, along with his wife Teresa Engel, an American. Robert claimed that a man named Tony came to his house, demanded money and threatened his life, as well as the lives of his father and brother. Tony said the hit could be called off if Robert paid 100,000 euros. Robert refused, called the police, and Tony was taken into custody. On February 26, 2007, Sharon Collins, Howard's partner and purported surrogate mother to his 2 adult sons, was arrested. This was based on information found on 2 gateway computers discovered during an FBI investigation into Tony. Computers revealed a series of emails between 2 individuals, with one person using the email address lyingeyes98@yahoo.ie to arrange the contract killing of the Howard men. The emails also mentioned a FedEx package sent to a Las Vegas address with a down payment of 15,000 euros for the hit. Upon investigation, it was found that Sharon had indeed withdrawn 15,000 euros from her credit union and bank accounts. Sharon completely denies having any contact with Tony. She acknowledged sending the money, but claimed it was due to blackmail, possibly by a woman whom she met online. Howard wrote to the DPP requesting no charges against Sharon, asserting she wasn't involved in the murder plot. Several individuals, including Sharon Collins, contacted the DPP about the case. Sharon wrote to them 3 times, detailing her case. She detailed her life, explaining how she got married at 19 and had 2 sons before separating and eventually getting divorced. In November 1998, she met Howard, and they moved in with her 2 sons before Christmas. This worried me because they lived together like a married couple, but were never officially married, because Howard was worried about his sons inheriting his business and fortune. In Ireland, a spouse is entitled to 1/3 of an estate, regardless of a will. Sharon was pressuring Howard to have a church wedding, due to her previous marriage being annulled, and Howard being a widower. They were advised that this could lead to a claim on Howard's estate. Instead, they settled for exchanging vows in a church in Italy, signing a document acknowledging it was not a legal marriage. Despite this, they acted as a married couple and held a reception party when they returned home. Sharon misled guests into thinking they were legally married. Howard and Sharon generally got along well, but they had strong personalities and often disagreed. In December 2005, Sharon mentioned meeting a woman named Maria Marconi online. Sharon confided in Maria about the arguments in her relationship with Howard. The 2 of them first connected when Sharon filled out a form online regarding working from home. Among many other emails, one in particular caught her attention: an invitation from a popular author to help her write a novel. Sharon filled out the form and returned it. Not long after, Maria Marconi contacted her, offering to mentor her. Over time, Sharon and Maria became friends, and Sharon started sharing more personal details with her. Sharon mentioned she hadn't informed Howard about Maria, as she wanted to wait and see how things progressed before bringing up her book project. During this period, she found the writing exercises helpful and therapeutic. Sharon wrote in a letter to the DPP that in April 2006, she and Howard had a disagreement, leading her to send an email to Maria where she expressed her anger towards Howard by calling him names and stating that she hated him. Sharon met Maria Marconi in June 2007, during a holiday in Ireland. Maria was a woman in her late 40s with straight brown hair, sallow skin, and about average height. They traveled around Clare together, and Maria used a computer in Howard's office at Balabec House. The next month, Maria contacted Sharon to inform her that her house had been robbed and her laptop stolen. Following this incident, Sharon started receiving strange emails from a man threatening to harm Howard and his sons for money or if she didn't pay. The man knew personal details about her life, which frightened Sharon. She was then told to give €20,000 to prevent the letter to Maria Marconi from being sent to Howard. She received phone calls and emails asking for the money, so she decided to send it in hopes of solving the issue. The night after sending the money, on August 16, 2007, she traveled to Spain thinking it was all over. However, she continued to receive demands for more money through phone calls and emails. She visited an internet cafe to contact Maria, but upon logging in, she realized all her emails and contacts were gone. Upon learning that Howard's office had been burglarized and the computers were stolen, she remembered that her password was saved on one of the computers, suspecting that's how her emails were deleted. She told the DPP also that when she had been brought in to speak to the police, they had read emails that they said were from her to a man named Tony. She told them she recognized parts of the emails, and that some of what she had written to Maria might have been lifted word for word, and had been added to make it look like Sharon herself was conspiring to have the Howard men murdered. Sharon's next two letters were much shorter compared to her previous ones. In those letters, she mentioned that she would not have used her real name, her personal computer, or the computer at Howard's office. Sharon believed that all these factors made it impossible for her to have committed the crime. She admitted that she was foolish, deceived, and manipulated. In hindsight, she realized that she should have confessed much earlier and told the truth. Sharon regretted not informing Howard about the incident when it occurred. She also said that she had nothing to gain from the Howard's murders. She was not properly named Nanny, and would not have had any claim on Howard's estate, since they were not married. In fact, if anything, Howard's death would mean that her source of income would be gone. She pleaded with the DPP not to press charges, and to trust that she had acted foolishly, but had not intended to kill. The DPP did not heed Howard or Sharon's advice. On June 26, 2007, the district court proceedings began. This court convenes 9 times a year, but today it was packed with photographers and journalists. Sharon, aged 44, was scheduled to appear in court. Additionally, it was reported that an Egyptian national residing in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA, was also present in court. He had been accused of attempting to extort €100,000, robbery, and dealing with stolen goods. However, those charges were dismissed in the morning. Upon leaving the courtroom, he was promptly rearrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Tony was taken by the police to Kilka to face these charges alongside Sharon. Both were brought before the court and formally charged with conspiring to kill Howard and his 2 sons, Robert and Neil. It's worth noting that each of the accused were granted free legal aid, and so the cost of the case was falling on the state, which in turn cost the taxpayer. So with 12 solicitors, the accused, police involved in the case, family members and press, the courtroom was packed the gills, and the judge was not a happy guys. So the following week, the case has moved to a much bigger venue. Sharon faced 3 charges of conspiracy to murder, and faced another 3 charges of soliciting Tony to murder the 3 men. Tony was recharged with making an unwarranted demand for €100,000 from Robert Howard, trespassing at the Howard's business premises, theft, and handling stolen goods. The 2 of them pleaded not guilty to each of the charges. The jury learned that the investigating officers had collected a lot of information and evidence, with help from the FBI in the United States, while they were investigating Tony for similar charges. According to the prosecution, Tony, also known as Tony Luciano, was asked by Sharon to kill the Howard men. Sharon had also obtained a proxy marriage certificate from Mexico for herself and Howard, which she paid €1,000 for without Howard's knowledge. She used this to apply for and receive an Irish passport in the name of Sharon Howard. Sharon had posted the keys to the Harrods business offices to Tony, and he used these to gain access and steal the computers that had evidence of Sharon's contact with him. Along with the keys, she sent him photographs and money. Robert had gone to the offices of his family business and noticed that the door was unlocked, and the alarm was no longer set. He saw that 2 computers were missing. Later that night, around 10:30 p.m., he received a phone call at home from a man he didn't know, who said he had heard that Robert lost a few computers. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and when Robert opened it, he found a man calling himself Tony, who had one of the computers. Robert took the computer into the house and informed his brother, Niall, who was also indoors, to contact the police. After coming back to the front door where Tony was waiting, Tony revealed that he had been hired to harm Robert, Neil, and their father Howard for 130,000 euros, but he refused to comply. Tony proposed to cancel the contract for 100,000 euros, which the Howard family agreed to pay. Tony showed Robert photographs of the Howards and a piece of paper with various directions to their houses. Robert was a little freaked, hoping the police would arrive soon before Tony tried to leave, which he did. Robert ended up following Tony, but lost him at the crossroads. Later, at around 12:30 a.m., Robert received another phone call from Tony, asking if he had started to get the money together, and there were several other calls the next day along the same lines. They made plans to meet at a hotel in Ennis for Robert to hand over the money, and Robert told the police about this. On the evening of the 27th of September 2006, Robert went to the hotel bar. He got another call telling him to meet a woman near the hotel bathrooms, as she would be collecting the money from him. This woman was Teresa, Tony's wife. When he got to the bathrooms, a woman asked him if he had the envelope, and just then, a plainclothes police passed them, and the woman took off without the money. The undercover female police followed Teresa, and she was seen talking to a man outside the hotel. They both went their separate ways, and the man headed to a pub across the road from the hotel. The police approached the man and arrested him there and then. This man was Tony. Teresa was arrested in the hotel car park. Howard supported Sharon during the investigation, arrest, and trial. On the stand, he expressed confusion as to why Sharon would be involved, stating she was not a greedy person and had never asked him for anything. He mentioned that shortly after the office break-in, Sharon informed him she was being blackmailed by Maria Marconi. Howard explained that he had asked Sharon to go to Las Vegas in order to hire a private investigator to locate Maria Marconi, but she was not successful in doing so. He also mentioned that he did not book the 2 flights from Las Vegas to Shannon Airport. It was charged to his American Express credit card, which coincided with flights taken by Tony and Teresa. Howard revealed that Sharon had his credit card information and took care of the payments. But unfortunately, her purse containing the details was stolen in Spain, either in August or September of 2006. He suspected that the thief was Teresa. After Howard finished his testimony, he left the stand and crossed the courtroom, where he gave Sharon a kiss on the lips. This caused a sensation amongst the media. He then left the courtroom and did not attend the rest of the trial. On Thursday, the 12th of June, Teresa Engel took to the stand, and it was established that she had been granted immunity for her testimony. They went through her background, and she had met Tony in 2003 or 2004 at a casino in Detroit near where she lived at the time. In June 2006, she moved to Las Vegas to live with Tony, and they got married. She, Tony, and another woman named Lisa all lived together. Lisa was Tony's first wife. Teresa mentioned that she had visited Ireland before, saying Tony had sent her there in response to emails he received from a woman seeking 3 men to be killed. She remembered receiving a cash payment of 15,000 euros delivered by FedEx. In Ireland, she met Tony's friend Ash in Ennis, who was supposed to poison the alcohol in Howard's office to kill the Howard sons. However, Ash ultimately decided not to go through with the plan and left. When the FBI were investigating Tony over fraud and extortion in the States, they had found evidence of the manufacturing of racing in the house that he lived in, and so this information was given in court in Ireland. The fraud and extortion in this case in the US was similar to the one in Ireland involving Sharon. Teresa had told a woman that her partner's ex had taken out a hit on her and that she'd be killed if she didn't send it $20,000. Obviously, rather than pay out the money to these people, she went to the cops. It turned out the ex-girlfriend had paid out $17,000 after finding Tony on the hitman for her website that he had set up. Teresa pleaded guilty and was eventually in 2008 sentenced to 8 months in prison. The next part of this story is another humdinger, as it involves the popular radio show personality Jerry Ryan, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but anyone Irish would have known him, and the producer of his show, Sia Ben Hoff. You see, our Sharon had wrote an email to the show, outlining her relationship with Howard. This email was only partially recovered, and so they brought Jerry Ryan and Sia Ben Hoff to the stand, but they stated they'd get over 2,000 emails a month. And neither of them remember seeing the email. The email stated that Howard visited prostitutes, as well as individuals Sharon referred to as transvestites. He asked her to engage in sexual activity that made her uncomfortable. Sharon mentioned that he had awful moods when he didn't get his way, and she could no longer tolerate it, although she was afraid to leave. I believe she was hesitant to abandon the lifestyle to which she was accustomed, but I may just be cynical. She mentioned in her letter to the show that she wanted to create a situation where she could end her current relationship. The email suggested 2 possibilities. Either Sharon was truly unhappy in her relationship, giving her a possible motive for murder, or she was lying and willing to tarnish her partner's reputation to gain sympathy. Maybe Sharon was hiding her true self. The prosecution argued during their closing statement that bringing in Jerry Ryan was unnecessary and irrelevant, claiming it was just a ploy by Sharon to attract more attention. On the 1st of July, the day had finally come that everyone had been waiting on. Sharon was the next up in the witness box. Next up was the prosecution to cross-examine Sharon. Everything that was put to her was denied, including how she organized the break-in at the Howard's office, how she paid the down payment of €15,000 for the hit, and claiming it was the money to pay the blackmailer, and how the Lying Eyes 98 email address didn't belong to her. She was accused of making up the person Maria Marconi to cover her tracks. She claimed that the phone calls she exchanged were with the woman and not a man. Sharon remained cool and collected during the cross-examination. She made sure to smile at the jury and played the part of an innocent person. However, the next day Sharon was a different woman in the court. She appeared drawn and lacked the confidence she had shown the previous day. The prosecution grilled her and went through her actions in detail. Sharon was unable to give clear explanations regarding the communication between the Lying Eyes account and the hitman, followed by a quick switch to her personal email from the same computer. She also could not clarify the searches on her laptop at Ballabeg House regarding inheritance, mortgages, and women's aid. Additionally, she had no explanation for the €15,000 tracking number used right after interactions between the Lying Eyes 98 and the hitman account. The defense argued that the police were biased in their investigation and only looked for evidence to make Sharon appear guilty. They mentioned phone data and records that were never thoroughly examined, which could have shown that someone else was in the house while Sharon and Howard were away. After the judge summed up the case, the jury deliberated for hours. Each counsel had requests for the judge. The jury spoke on the case and were retired to a hotel. The next day, the judge recharged the jury and deliberations continued. On the 3rd day, finally, a decision was made. Early afternoon, the jury filed into the courtroom and delivered their verdict on 7 charges. Sharon had been found guilty of 3 charges relating to the soliciting the murder of the 3 men, Howard, Robert, and Neil. She had also been found guilty of charges relating to demanding €100,000 from Robert to cancel the contract of killing all 3 of them, but not guilty of the robbery of the Howard offices. Sharon broke down in tears as the jury returned to deliberate further on the outstanding charges. By 3 p.m., the jury returned and found her guilty of the conspiracy to murder counts. By 6 p.m., they returned and ultimately could not reach a decision regarding the guilt or innocence of Tony on those counts. Both were remanded in custody to await sentencing, and for the first time, Sharon was going to spend time in prison. On Monday, November 5th, Sharon and Tony went to court for sentencing. Sharon maintained her innocence as she faced the judge again. Howard also spoke to the judge, saying he still supported Sharon and didn't think she could have planned to kill him. It was taken into account that Sharon had no previous record, but obviously, it wasn't taken into account that she'd never admitted to her guilt when sentencing. She was sentenced to 6 years in total, and would serve 4 years and 9 months. Tony was sentenced to 6 years in total also, and took his sentencing all in his stride. I suppose compared to US prisons, ours are like a holiday camp. It was backdated to 2006. Howard expended nearly €200,000 on a private detective in an attempt to obtain fresh evidence for Sharon's appeal, but it was unsuccessful. Sharon was eventually set free in September 2012. And in 2015, she granted an interview to the Irish Independent newspaper after relocating to Belfast, Northern Ireland. Throughout, she continued to assert her innocence and contemplated writing a book to share her perspective, but ultimately opted for a low-key lifestyle, aspiring to lead a peaceful existence. During her time in prison, she obtained certification in sports massage therapy and now works as a professional dog walker. She only intended to stay in Belfast for a short while, but she made such good friends up there that she decided to stay. Howard stood by her all the time she was in prison, but after she got out, the relationship fizzled out and they both went their own way. Howard went to Spain to recover, and to this day spends most of his time there, while his 2 sons still manage a thriving business despite everything that went on. In 2016, Eve gave an interview to the Sunday World newspaper. He returned to his native Egypt, where he is now a cattle farmer, and had some harsh words for Sharon. He spoke of her statement that everyone deserves a second chance, saying that applies only to people who admit what they did wrong. Tony was extradited back to the States while in custody, as he faced charges of extortion. Once he had served his time in the US, he attempted to put his life back together. He did become ill, and after no one came to visit him in the hospital, he realized his life in the US was over after spending 32 years there, and he returned to his native Egypt. It's hard to believe that Sharon fell for the scam. She would have considered herself as intelligent and a computer expert, having taken a course in 1982. However, the computers of 2006 were a different ballgame. Metadata, cell data, browsing history, and so on were just about to become mainstream. Nowadays, we nearly all know that data is kept and our every movement can be traced. And yet, we still have people who make these mistakes and leave a treasure trove of evidence. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.